Hello and welcome to this episode of Trash to Track. Now in this box I've got multiple parts for a Hornby 4 VEP EMU which I've been buying over the last couple of years to make one unit. Now about 2 years ago or so I bought an all blue 4 VEP with the idea of painting it into Network Southeast. But I got as far as stripping it all down and I acquired some spare body shells, but that's as far as the project went. And this box has amassed various pieces of 4 VEP ever since. So I've got 2 end cars there in all blue and several chassis. Now let's have a look at what chassis I've got. I've got one there for an end car with the PCB attached. I've got another end chassis, the TSO. There's another TSO chassis, another driving end. You've got the motor coach, which needs some repair, and another end. So there's 6 chassis altogether. Now, I did strip this down, but the one thing that put me off was the curtains that were printed on the glazing, and I never got very far with it. But then the other week, a friend of mine contacted me and said he had a Network Southeast set of bodies, and would I be willing to swap for the all-blue version, as he wanted a blue one. So, of course, I jumped at the chance, and I've acquired 4 Network Southeast bodies, and that will save one hell of a repaint job, as well as the cost of the paint and the masking, etc. Initially, this Trash to Track was going to be a 2-parter of me repainting this entire unit. I've also got a box of spare glazing for those blue units. And I'm going to set about now trying to make one good unit out of all the parts we've got here. And without a doubt, these Network Southeast bodies are worth their weight in gold, because the paint job would have been a mammoth task. This one's missing a roof vent, or a water filler cap, should I say, on there that keeps the pipes in place. But that's got the PCB in it, so we should be good. We should have enough to make one unit. Now, this is the driving motor chassis. That's got the DCC PCB in that in there. You've got the TSO coach, the only coach with the 2 plugs, and then another end coach. And they're all in relatively good conditions. There's a few marks, but it's a better paint job than I'd have achieved trying to paint them. So I'm going to have a look at what chassis we've got. And this one's got a bit of damage to the shoe beam. But before I do go into the chassis too much, I'll just show you that the glazing for these all blue units has got these orange curtains printed onto the glazing. And I was stumped as to how to remove that, which is why the repaint and rebuild never progressed anywhere. I basically stripped it all down and then lost interest in it because I couldn't work out how to get the glazing off. But that's aside now. We can now start reassembling this model. Now, this is a driving end chassis. The 3rd rail shoes on the end there. That looks to be in good condition. We can certainly use that. So I'm going to get my paintbrush and give this a dust over. Because like I said, these have been in storage for well over 2 years. So they're quite dusty. So I'm going to dust all this down. Here is the end coach. But when I go to fit it, I notice that there's a wire come off the lighting unit for the tail and headlights there. So we're going to have to remedy that first. So while the soldering iron heats up, I'm going to set that body shell aside and have a look at this chassis. Now, take that old bit of masking tape off. And this is the chassis for the TSO coach. Now, I'll give this a dust over as well. These chassis are generally in very good condition. I think 4 of them were actually from an all blue set. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the TSO body shell. And this is the only body shell with 2 sets of micro plugs on each end. And it only dawned on me when I was doing the voiceover that this coach body could have gone on either way. Now, I'm not sure if there's a correct way round it goes, but I've put it on this way, and I was lucky because the lights work in it, as you'll see shortly. So I'm a bit nervous about attaching these little clips because the wiring is easily broken, as you saw on that end coach just a moment ago. And the last thing I want to do is break these clips. So using my tweezer-nose pliers, I try and line up these micro plugs and then try and connect them in. Now, the wires they're attached to are quite stiff. They're not easy to do, and like I said, I'm conscious I don't want to break them. So I'm just checking to make sure everything's okay glazing wise inside that body shell there. And then using these pliers, I gently manipulate one of the micropin connectors in one end. And once that's in, I do the same with the other end. And they just slot in. They're quite a tight fit, but that stiff wire doesn't help. And then once they're on, I just check that they're pushed down fully on. It's then a simple case of clipping the body shell in place and not trapping any wires, and the body shell simply snaps down and is held in place with some clips. Now, it wasn't very easy to do. It's very tight fit, and in fact on this side what I do is I use the back of my scalpel. I don't use the sharp end, the blunt side, flat side, and just run it along the inside of the body shell to open it up and allow it to clip in. Now, again, looking back, maybe I should have used a cocktail stick, not something that could have scratched the paint. I was lucky there. Don't follow my example. Use a cocktail stick if you end up doing this. But once the body shell goes on, it's a clip fit. All the footboards line up with the doors and everything appears to be where it should be. So that's one coach of the 4-car unit done already. So that's not too bad. That was relatively simple. So we'll put that aside until later when I come to clean all the wheels. I don't think the wheels are conductive on the whole unit, but it's worth cleaning them, otherwise you'll just spread the muck onto your layout. This end coach had a broken third rail pickup bar on one end. So I could glue that, but I'm going to have a look at the other chassis to see if that's broken. And the other one is missing entirely. So, and there's a cotton bud stuck in it there. So the other one's missing entirely, so we'll set that aside and we'll use this good one. This is the other one I've got. This one's just got a bit of a bent shoe there, and this is also loose. So 2 of them are loose, 2 of them require gluing. So I'm going to dust this one off again. And it really was a case of picking the best of the bunch here to rebuild this unit. And then using some Loctite super glue, because the plastic lug had snapped off, I'm just going to apply a small amount onto the bogie where the plastic lug should have gone, and then just push the third rail collector shoes back in place and leave that to dry. And this stuff dries really quickly. So we'll set that aside, and this body shell is the one that's missing that water filler vent on the top there. So I'll take one of those off those spare all blue body shells in a moment. And this also appears to be in good condition. A couple of marks on the roof, and some of the handrails are damaged, but we might be able to glue them back into place as well. And this is the motor coach, and there's the DCC socket and PCB all in the roof there. So I'll give this a dust over with the paintbrush as well. They're very dusty, these body shells, as are the chassis. It's surprising how dusty they are, considering the chassis have been in a shoebox for the best part of 2 years. So take all this old masking tape off. This was on because when I stripped the blue units down, I put the glazing into bags, sandwich bags, and taped them to the car they were relevant to. So there's the motor bogie, and the pickup bogie on the left hand side there is all apart. The pickups are loose, the wheels are out of it. So I'm just going to use a cotton bud and mess to clean the pickups on this coach. And then once all the pickups were clean, they weren't really dirty per se, just quite dusty. The pickup brasses actually fit into a holder that's cast into the bogie there. So I just use the pliers, not that it's focused at all, but I use the pliers just to push them back into the retaining clips where they're supposed to be. And once they're where they're supposed to be, I get the wheels, and again cotton bud and mess, and just give the wheels a quick clean up. These are more dusty than dirty, but I'll give them a quick wipe over with the cotton bud and mess. No need to use any like fiberglass pencils or anything this time. And then these are put in the pickup bogie. Now, both wheels are insulated from the axle because they both pick up power, so it doesn't matter which way around they go. And then the keeper plate is snapped back in place, pretty much like a Lima diesel, that really. Now the driving wheels have got traction tyres on them, and I'll give these a clean as well. But as you'll see, the traction tyres have actually perished while it's been in storage. They're actually no good, so I'm going to have to get replacements for them. And I'm going to clean off as much of the old white grease as I can because it's kind of funny colour. There's also pickups on both of these wheels, traction tied and non, and I've demonstrated in the past the relevance of traction tied wheels with pickups. Some fresh grease is applied to the drive gear in there. It's one of those sealed motor units, so you can't open it up to access the motor. It's all in one sealed unit. So I'm going to put some Labelle 106 on the axles and in the drivetrain, and I've also cleaned the pickups. Now another thing I do is when this model came to me, both traction tyres are on the same side. But I found for ease of running and more consistent running, I put the traction tyres at opposite ends of the motor. So there's one traction tyre on that wheel that's in the motor bogie is top left. And when I put this other wheel in, when the traction tyre's on, that traction tyre will be on the bottom right. So there we go, they're diagonally opposite each other. And that will also aid in electrical pickup from both sides of the rail. It has no detrimental effect on the running at all. In fact, it improves running because with both traction tyres on one side, it can be a bit juddery. So I'm also going to put a small amount of oil in there just to thin that grease out a little bit, and that will help it spread through the drivetrain inside the sealed motor. The bogie frame was dusted off, and this is a very simple clip fit in place. Now that should be, hopefully, the chassis fully rebuilt. So both bogies are now sorted out. And this PCB, I'm going to fit a decoder. The decoder sits there in the roof. Now you can put it in the vestibule on the chassis, but I opted to push it up in the what are they called, luggage racks. So I push it up in the luggage racks and it's out of the way. I've just noticed there that this wire has come off this decoder, so that's yet more soldering to do. It's not going to work like that. So out comes the decoder again, and I'm going to solder it. Now, talking of soldering, to get to the PCB on the driving cab, you have to strip the whole unit down to get the PCB out because I couldn't solder that wire where it was in situ. I mean, it was a hell of a faff. You have to take all the glazing out to get to the luggage racks to get to the PCB. The glazing holds the PCB in place. You have no choice but to take it all out. So I'm just putting the light lenses in the front of the unit there. They were pushed in place, as you can see on this one that hasn't been taken apart. And then I've resoldered that wire onto the PCB, and I'm holding that in there with a little bit of plastic weld cement because it kept coming out. It was very loose. So I just tagged it in there with a little bit of glue just to hold it in. And then, like I said, I've soldered the wire back on, and now it's time to put the PCB back in. And this will, again, this is very fiddly. It's one hell of a design, this 4VEP, and this is the older 4VEP that's been out about 10 years. But the PCB is held in place with the luggage racks and glazing. If you have a faulty PCB, you have to virtually strip the entire model down. And a problem I had with the all blue model was a lot of the glazing broke because the glue Hornby used was horrendous. They had used so much of it, you couldn't get the glazing out. However, on this Network Southeast body shell, I was extremely lucky in that the glazing was only lightly tacked in. I mean, it could have gone the other way. It could have been a disaster. But I wanted this unit to have the correct suite of working lights, so I had to resolder those wires. As you can see, I'm just pulling that micro connector out where it should be. And then the luggage racks are screwed in, and this end piece here, the corridor connector piece for the inside detail, that's put back in place. It should clip in place, but I actually used a small amount of glue to hold it in place. Now that's all done, it's now time to refit all of this glazing. And I'd actually laid the glazing out on the workbench in the order it came out of. And it is a simple case of trying to push it back in near that luggage rack, and then all the windows snap back into place. Well, it will do when I can get it in. It wasn't the easiest job to do, it was extremely fiddly. But once the windows are snapped in place, as you can see there, make sure they're in fully. And then it was difficult getting those guard windows in. I'm not sure why that was so difficult, but the other windows went in really well. But that bit then goes there. And then what I do is, once they're in place and they're held in place with their own friction by clip fitting, I use a small amount of EMA plastic weld and just drop it down the side, and capillary action takes that glue round the glazing. It doesn't affect the glazing at all, and it will hold it in place. I've got no intention of taking this model apart again unless one of those PCBs fails, so I've lightly glued all the windows back in, and that's the end coach now rebuilt. And what a faff that was trying to get all of those windows out. Unfortunately, I got a little bit of glue on that glaze in there. I dropped the paintbrush, but it's not that noticeable when the model's back together. But it was a right faff getting all that out there just to solder one wire back onto the PCB. Now, to attach this body shell again, that micro connector comes down with the Tweezernose pliers into the connecting hole there, and it's pushed home. And then this body shell, you have to be careful with this one when you put this back on. You don't want to dislodge those front lights. And that body shell snaps down as well. So that's another coach done. So we're working our way through it slowly. And it is starting to look nice. Making sure that everything's, all the footboards aligned correctly. No damage. So that's 2 of the 4 coaches fully rebuilt. Now we're going to look at these handrails shortly, because a lot of them are missing, but I do have them in a spares tub. So now I've soldered the wire back on the decoder, and it goes again for the motor coach, making sure the orange is on pin number 1. And it sits up there inside the luggage racks. And I'm just moving that connector out the way. And then this large connector with the stiff wire, again, that goes on there and connects into that rather large socket on the chassis. Now on the all blue model, the PCB on the motor coach had broken. Some of the wires had come off the solder joints. So again, I was conscious not to do that again. You can get spares, but it's a faff. And now once that was all clipped back together, I'm now cleaning the wheel backs there, and I'm going to give it a battery test, and the motor coach is running. For the first time in over 2 years, this chassis is drawing power. The lights are on and it is working as it should. So we'll turn our attention now to the last coach of the unit, which again is an end car. And again, this gets the dusting down treatment. And I'm happy to say, apart from this bent luggage rack in here, this body shell is ready to clip on again. So here we go. Micro connector in. So that's, what's that, 5 micro connectors we've put in now. And luckily we got them all right first time. And just like all the other coaches, this body shell simply sits down onto the chassis and clips back in place. Now using a pin, I am going to align all the handrails that are existent on this body shell, and then using the pin, I'm going to apply a very, very small amount of super glue to the handrails to glue them into place, as the connecting lugs have broken off, and I didn't really fancy making a whole new raft of handrails for this model out of brass, because this video is long enough as it is. But using a pin just to apply a small amount of super glue and then holding the handrail in place, that was sufficient to put them back where they should be and hold them in place. And as I've mentioned before, if you're careful with this Loctite super glue, it does not leave a white bloom. If you use too much of it, it will do, but if you use a small amount, it won't. And then when the handrails are glued in, I've salvaged one of these water filler vent things off the all blue body shell, and that only goes in one way. There's a semicircular cutout. So applying again a small amount of super glue on that, I drop that in place, and then with the Tweezernose pliers manipulate the wire into 2 pre-drilled holes that are in that vent. I just manipulate the wire back in there. It was quite springy, so it wasn't the easiest thing to do. And it's springy so that it holds itself in place with friction. You don't need to glue this wire in. And there we go, that's all back in place. So I'll just make sure that it's pushed as fully home as possible. And then once that's done, I'm going to turn my attention to the other handrails that are missing. Now the end handrails on this one have gone completely. So using a 0.3mm drill bit, which is flexing a bit there, I'm going to drill out the holes where the lugs were, and I'm going to replace some of the handrails that I found in that box of glazing. These came off the all blue unit, and I've got enough handrails for the driver's cab doors. The only thing I'm missing now is handrails for the fronts. I do not have any spares for the fronts. So after I've glued all these handrails in, I'm actually going to make some out of brass wire. So this is 0.3mm brass wire, and you can see there that I've drilled those holes out. So I'm going to bend these to shape now. This was trial and error because I'm not the best at this. But bending them to shape so there's a right angle there. I put it where the handrail should go, into the body shell, and then basically bend it around. Then cut it to length and manipulate it and bend it into shape. So eventually, I'll just cut it off there because obviously there's loads excess. And then eventually, bending it around gently, I actually managed to bend it into the correct shape. And I make two, one for each side. And again, this was held in place with a small amount of super glue. Now, I'm impressed with that. They're not too bad, really. Considering I really don't like bending handrails up, I don't think they have gone too badly, because it's not exactly a 90-degree bend in that wire. It's quite curved on either end, so I'm pleased with how that's gone. And then when they were fixed in place with some super glue, I actually masked behind the handrail with some Tamiya masking tape, and then I painted them black with some rail match satin black paint. And this was the easiest thing to do. I know the camera keeps focusing on my hand, but trying to manipulate this masking tape around these handrails wasn't the easiest thing to do. There's not that much gap behind them, but we get there in the end, even though I am going off shot a bit. And there we go. I'm just painting them, touching them in black, and I've obviously masked that paintwork because I don't want to ruin that Network Southeast finish. I'm just touching them in, like I say, just very gently touching the ends in. So this model rebuild really has had the full hog: soldering, painting, rebuilding. But it's starting to come together now, and once these are painted and left to dry, I will pull the masking tape off from behind, and there we go. Now they don't look too bad at all, do they? When the model's on the layout and it's not being subject to close-up filming, that will look spot on, and I think they look a lot better. So now that the unit is virtually rebuilt, I'm going to upend every single coach in the loco cradle, and I'm going to give each and every wheel a quick wipe over with a cotton bud of meths, because I don't want there to be any dirt build up. Some wheels were dirtier than others, and in fact one of the wheels had quite a bit of carbon build up on it, which required the use of the fiberglass pencil. So when this was an all blue unit, it obviously had some use in the past, but after that one, all the other wheels were relatively clean, and these were all given a good clean up. Now, on testing initially, there was a problem with the model, and you can see here that when it went to go around a third radius curve, it just carried on straight and actually collided with my 58. So it was back onto the workbench because the coupling cams were stopping the bogies from rotating around corners. Now, I've had this before on class 50s and 60s, but my other VEP that I've got doesn't do it. So it was quite stiff, it was quite dry in there. So, and I wanted to keep the coupling because I've already got a 4 VEP and I wanted to run it as an 8 car. So my solution was to strip it down again, and I put a small amount of label grease on the slide part there, which is inside the model where the coupling cam goes, and then just work that grease around there a bit, and already it's a lot freer. But then what I also do is I put some oil on that piece there where the screw is, and that lubricates it fully, and now it is very, very free spinning now, and it shouldn't derail that bogie when it goes round corners. So obviously both end cars were taken apart and both end couplings were treated in this manner, and as you'll see when I've reassembled the model for a second time, when it's running on the layout, it will go around corners and tight corners through point work with no problems whatsoever. So if you're having difficulty with your 4VEP and the couplings are stiff, it may be worth lubricating that coupling cam. So that's it. We've made a complete 4-car Network Southeast unit out of all those bits and bobs in that shoebox, and I'm really happy with this. I'm indebted to Matt, who swapped the Network Southeast bodies for all blue ones, as it really did save a huge task of repainting. The only thing left to do now is to put some numerals in the head code panels, which I will do before we run this model in. There's the homemade handrails, and I hope you'll agree that this really is a lovely, stunning looking unit. And I already have a Network Southeast one, so now I've got an 8-car Southern commuter set that I can run around the layout. Not only that, I've also got a couple of spare cars now, which include spare bogies, spare PCBs, spare lighting and coupling units that I will keep. I could even be tempted to make a 2-car VEP, like a provincial 2-car electric multiple unit, but there's plenty of spares there. I've got glazing and buffers and all that, so I'll put these aside, back in the box, and they can go on the shelf should I ever need them in the future, and all the glazing's there in that tub. If you've got an engine or anything you'd like to see mended or repaired on Trash to Track, please email me at dansmodelrailways@gmail.com. Who knows, we'll get it sent over, and it may even feature in an episode all of its own. So as you can see here, the 4-car unit is now running. All the lights are working correctly. I've put some numerals in the head codes, as I've got 26 on one end and 30 on the other. No particular reason other than 26th is my birth date and 30th is my wife's, so that's why it's got 26 and 30 on it. And I'll leave you now with some shots of the VEP running around the layout, and I'm sure you'll agree it looks really stunning in this Network Southeast livery. Thank you for watching Trash to Track again. Please like, share and subscribe, and I will catch you all in the next video. Bye for now. Took away.